must be Harrison Ford. How do you know that? I think for nine heroic movies, you've been a part of George's life, and you've been a part of my life. But in friendship, Harrison, you are my biggest hero, so thank you for tonight. And Kerry Washington, your work as an artist and a human rights advocate is an inspiration. And the way you deftly handle a political crisis on your hit series Scandal reminds us that staying relevant while being entertaining is one of the most effective ways to have impact. So thank you for that, Kerry. And John Williams, I can say this very, very simply. George's movies and my movies could not have lived without you. You're totally in your debt, as everyone in this room is, whose heart has swooned and pounded because of your incomparable talent. From your theme tonight performed brilliantly. Theme from Schindler's List captured both the heartbreaking fragility and the dignity of the souls who are served by this foundation. Thank you, John. And thank you, James Corden, for making us laugh. We're going to need you to do a lot of that in the coming years. James is also, I think, the smartest man in this room because he found a way to monetize something we all do, which is singing in the car. So, I also want to recognize our presenting sponsor this evening, the Walt Disney Company. And former ambassador of humanity recipient, and my dear, dear friend, Bob Iger. For being a tremendous supporter of the Shoah Foundation from the outset. So thank you for that. And also I want to thank to all of our educational partners, USC President Max Nikias, Provost Michael Quick, Boardside Dean Amber Miller. It was nice meeting you tonight. Our Executive Director, the brilliant Stephen Smith. Our very generous Gala Leadership Board of Counselors, Chair Stephen Cozen, Stephen, and the countless others who keep our flame of remembrance eternal. And finally, Pinkett Scooter, you are the consummate teacher and you are the consummate role model. And your bravery and the bravery of all who have borne witness ensures that our mission to never forget will be remembered. Your work served not just a people or a generation, but all the future generations. And I think you are much more handsome in real life, too. I agree with your wife. So as most of you know, Schindler's List, the Shoah Foundation, grew out of Schindler's List. And over the course of more than 2 decades, the last 10 years of which we partnered with USC, we have, in a sense, extended Schindler's List from 1,200 Holocaust survivors to now nearly 54,000. And this is beyond a doubt. This is beyond a doubt some of the most fulfilling work of my entire career. But however, I think it's Schindler's realization at the end of the film that he could have done more. And this might be the movie's most universal moral reflection. And this is where we are today. Proud of how far we've come, but knowing that we have not come far enough. Because the world keeps reminding us of that. Anti-Semitism, Islamophobia are again on the rise in America and Europe. Mosques right here in LA are receiving threats of genocide on Muslims. And our politics have become embroiled in discouraging racial rhetoric. I think about if you all remember this, the haunting image that shocked us of the young boy pulled out of the rubble in Aleppo after an airstrike. And in this picture, he sits stunned and staring at the camera. His feet are shoeless, his face is caked with a combination of blood and mud. And all of a sudden, it seemed like everyone woke up to the rising death toll of the Syrian people, nearly 500,000 since 2011, and it took on a child's face. And then, after about a month, the attention was gone, the news cycle dissipated, that child's face was lost to the archives, and today little has changed. And right here in the US, we're entering a colder, meaner period. Less than a week ago, 3 men attacked an 18-year-old Muslim woman in a Manhattan subway. If you remember reading about this, she was wearing a hijab when these 3 young men approached her, shouting the name of our president-elect. The men followed her onto a train and told her to get out of the country, that she didn't belong here. And now she ignored them, but then they assaulted her, attempting to pull off her headscarf, and she ran off the train, and then she called the police. Now, not only was this woman traumatized, she was devastated that no one on the train came to her aid. The Daily News quoted Yasmin describing how people were looking at me and looking at what was happening to me, and no one said a thing. They all just looked away. You see, now more than ever, there is staggering urgency to educate people on the darkness that consumes the world when hate and violence and tribalism are given a free pass. So now more than ever, we need to teach the next generation to take a stand and speak their conscience when bigotry is happening right in our faces. Because we are part of the solution. Because there can be no more bystanders. USC's Shoah Foundation's educational work is helping us to ask questions that challenge us to look into the darkest places just to search for a little light. Our honorees tonight, Melody and George, possess courage and vision and humanity. They are fearless when it comes to pointing out hypocrisy and injustice, and they are equally fearless when it comes to pointing out truth and fairness. They have both led lives of the greatest integrity and of the highest accomplishment. And look at them, they are just so cute. And they might offer the familiar words of a little green Jedi, "Forgive me if I don't do a Yoda impersonation." Let me just quote him, unless Harrison knows how to do Yoda. No, okay. I know JJ knows how to do Yoda. But no, he's shaking his head, okay. So, Yoda said, "Fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering." And I believe they will go on to tell you, George and Melody, that the best way to battle fear is through education. The power of education may have taken George a little longer to fully understand than Melody, because I suspect she's always been an A+ student, but not George. We have so many things in common, and that's one of them. His experience in grade school was, in his own words, quite frustrating. And it won't surprise you that George was a daydreamer. He didn't like the rigidity of any form of curriculum. And as some of you might know, Melody sure does, Kathy sure does, George can be rather, what's the euphemism here? George can be rather stubborn. And all he wanted to do as a school kid was just to draw doodles, draw pictures, and race cars. And as Bob Falfa, a character in American Graffiti played by a newbie actor named Harrison Ford, would say, George wanted to be the fastest thing in the valley. So after a near-fatal car crash, George changed his tune, and he changed his course. And he went to college, where he realized that the problem wasn't in education that was frustrating him, but it was the way learning was transmitted. And as a filmmaker, he knew the value of visual education, visual storytelling. Education is storytelling. So what George did in 1991 was that he founded the George Lucas Educational Foundation, a very catchy name, which provides students with the tools that bring them together to solve problems. And thanks to George's foundation and Edutopia, kids become engaged in the learning process. It becomes an ambition. They are taught to use open dialogue and they're taught to develop curiosity. And it's a method that both George and some guy named Aristotle believed works. And George has always been, in that sense, in the lead car. And to use a street racing analogy, he's used to seeing only empty road out his front windshield. But all that came to a tire screech the day he met Melody Hobson. And that's when George fell back into her slipstream and found the greatest partner of his life. And that's coming from a guy who co-wrote Indiana Jones with him. At the wedding, the amazing wedding of George and Melody, the legendary musician, rest his soul, Prince, agreed to perform at George and Melody's wedding, and Melody raved about him and that day, and she called Prince unapologetically original. So I say it takes one to know one, because Melody herself, and her business acumen, and her grace, and as an advocate for education, is unapologetically original. She's been instrumental in getting women and minorities to corporate boardrooms. We saw earlier that she and George have provided funding and leadership for the After School Matters in Chicago, which opens so many doors for great kids who could use two things: a champion and a chance. And she too has offered a new perspective on education, promoting financial instruction to students at an early age. I think it's called a financial literacy instruction to students at a very young age. Melody has a full-time high-powered job as the president of Ariel Investments, but she still finds time to speak around the country, challenging people to be color brave, not colorblind. Because to Melody, no one should turn a blind eye to diversity. Instead, she suggests we actively put ourselves in situations where we can learn about one another, grow from one another, and develop deep empathy. This inclusion makes us stronger, and it makes our institutions stronger, and no one embodies strength of character more than Melody does. So together, Melody and George are now currently building the Lucas Museum of Narrative Art. Oh, please in LA, please in LA, please in LA. Which will bring together people of every identity to examine history and the history of storytelling, which is really the history of humanity. When we develop the characters and plot of a movie, we try to create situations in which an irresistible force meets an immovable object. And one of these has to break, and we, of course, hope it's the villain, not the hero. But since it's so ripe for metaphor again, let me just say that Melody and George are the irresistible force, and ignorance is the immovable object. There is a special trait about our honorees tonight, an ability to break through the enemy's shields, all the enemy's shields. You can call it talent or wisdom, or call it magic, or fine, some of you can call it the force. But through their work to educate the next generation, and with your support for USC Shoah Foundation, I really think we can count on a happy ending and a very long epilogue. So, tonight, I am honored to present USC Shoah Foundation's highest honor to Melody Hobson and my brother, George Lucas, who are truly now and have always been ambassadors for humanity. George, Melody.